From Guyana, there's a possibility that you have the world's most valuable thing in your home. No, I'm not talking about the love of your family. I am talking about a $9.48 million US piece of merchandise stuck somewhere in between a stack of old letters. This is the story of the world's most famous stamp, the British Guiana 1-cent Magenta. Greetings and welcome to another episode of For the Culture Guyana. Today, we're talking about the British Guiana 1-cent Magenta stamp. It is a stamp so rare that it is literally the single most expensive item in the world by weight. A stamp so valuable that the French took it from Germany as payback for World War I. A stamp so mythical that even Donald Duck, yes, Donald Duck, went on a journey through the interior of Guyana to find it. But before we get into that, like and share our video and subscribe to our channel for more great content. The story of this stamp begins in April 1856. At the time, stamps for the colony of British Guiana were made by a London-based printing company. Most times, this system worked. Except for this time, the stamps ran out before a fresh shipment could arrive from England. Thinking quickly, the postmaster of British Guiana, E.T.E. Dalton, commissioned an emergency run from the firm of Joseph Baum and William Dallas, publishers of the Official Gazette in Georgetown. They printed 1-cent stamps for newspapers and 4-cent stamps for letters. Dalton asked for a replication of the design found on the regular stamps. That was the name British Guiana and the seal of the colony, which was a ship, with the Latin motto, Damus Petimus Que Vicissum. In English, we give and we seek in return. Dalton took one look at the locally made stamps and it was rejection at first sight. He reportedly hated the design and the poor quality of the paper it was printed on. In fact, the quality was so poor that Dalton asked the postal workers to initial each stamp before selling it to prevent forgeries. By the time the local batch had run out, the anticipated shipment of the original stamps arrived. The 1-cent Magenta soon began to fade into distant memory. That was until 1873 when Vernon Vaughan, a 12-year-old Scottish boy living in Demerara, found the stamp while rummaging through his uncle's personal effects. This specific stamp bore the initials EDW for Postal Clerk E.D. White. It was still attached to a piece of paper, so the boy wet it to loosen the adhesive. However, this obviously damaged the already poor quality paper. But when the lad finally freed this rare one-of-a-kind stamp from its papery prison, he unfortunately made the same mistake many persons do with rare and misunderstood objects. He sold it for a pittance, as he did not have a full appreciation of its inherent value. He sold the stamp to a local stamp collector for 6 shillings, so he could buy better-looking stamps for his collection. That's around $1 US in today's money. However, even its new owner, N.R. McKinnon, couldn't see its value and sold it 5 years later to a man in Scotland, and thus began the 100-year journey that the stamp took around the world. However, its rarity was still not revealed until years later when a London stamp dealer assessed it. The Magenta then passed through the hands of several prominent stamp collectors. Nevertheless, the first true show of this stamp's value is arguably the short custody battle that occurred in 1917 following the death of its then owner, Count Philippe von Ferrari of Paris. When he died, Ferrari bequeathed his massive stamp collection to the Museum for Communication in Berlin. But before the Germans could even say Dankeschön, the French government seized the whole collection, including the 1-cent Magenta. When he was alive, the Count used to just travel the world buying up rare stamps, and actually by his death, he had what was considered the world's best stamp collection, with some of the rarest and most beautiful in the world. However, don't be fooled, the French did not rob a German museum exhibit for the love of philately. They did it for the money. The whole assortment was auctioned off to pay for German reparations for World War I. And during one of these auctions in 1922, wealthy stamp collector Arthur Hind paid a record 352,500 francs for the British Guiana 1-cent Magenta. But Arthur wasn't a regular stamp collector. I mean, obviously he was rich, but he was also obsessed. In fact, it was rumored that he was so obsessed with it that he actually bought and destroyed the only other existing 1-cent magenta just to drive up the value and the rarity of his own. Now, legend aside, this real record-breaking purchase further increased the value and public attention for the rare stamp, and by this time, the world was having stamp fever. The public was so captivated by the concept of such a rare piece of postage that even Disney made a whole Donald Duck comic book called The Gilded Man in 1952 about it. In the story, Donald Duck takes a trip into the hinterland for the stamp and eventually runs into El Dorado, a man covered in gold dust. Sounds familiar? Anyway, he eventually obtains the stamp from the king and he goes home happy. Now, back to the stamp. Hines publicly displayed it in several museums until he died. It then again went through a series of owners until March of 1970, when a business syndicate bought the stamp for 280,000 US dollars. Their aim was to keep rarities such as the British Magenta in Guyana. In America. No, they don't want it in Guyana, they wanted America. Their aim was to keep rarities such as the British Magenta in America. It was on public display several times over the next decade, until 1980 when it sold for $935,000. That buyer was the heir to the DuPont Chemical Company fortune, Mr. John E. DuPont. He held on to it until his death in 2010. However, it was locked away in a bank vault for years, as DuPont was actually committed to a mental facility for the majority of the time he owned the stamp. He was convicted in February of 1997 of fatally shooting an Olympic wrestler whom he had sponsored. Fast forward to 2014, the stamp reached its current owner, shoe designer Stuart Weitzman, an avid stamp collector who paid $9.48 million US dollars in a Sotheby's auction. Unlike DuPont, Weitzman allowed the public to see this rarity on multiple occasions, most recently in 2016. And that was the story of the world's most famous stamp, the British Guiana 1-cent magenta. Truth time. How many of you actually just stopped the video just now to go tumbling through that stack of mail on your end table? And if you'd like more information about the stamp, check out the link to our website in the description. There you have all the sources we used in this video. If you liked the video, hit the like button and let us know exactly what you liked about it in the comments. Also, I want to give a big thank you to all our supporters. Without you all, we wouldn't be here. And finally, share For the Culture Guyana's videos with all of your friends and family so they too can learn interesting facts about Guyana. Until next week, thanks for watching and do it for the culture.